and I am welcome, and I am here today with Selena Mills. She is Scott's sister. Some of you may know Cassia. The little ones might remember her. She came to teach you all Tai Chi. So for those of you familiar with Cassia, this is her sister, and she lives in London, correct?
Hello from London, yes.
So I am going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself if that's okay.
Absolutely. So I'm Selena Mills, and I'm always the sister of Cassia Scott. But I'm also a writer and a journalist, and I write specifically about disability, and my journalism generally covers the arts, and sometimes how that intersects with disability. And I've worked for the BBC and the Times and the Telegraph, and last year I wrote a book. Well, it took me quite a long time actually, but it came out last year, and it's called Life Unseen, A Story of Blindness, and it's memoir mixed with history. So I'm trying to show how my own life is impacted by history. And my view is that no one eats their broccoli without a good bit of cheese sauce. So I kind of feel like I was trying to give the broccoli, but kind of covered with entertaining stories on the way.
That's a good way to think of it. So you've kind of told us a little bit about your book, Life Unseen. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you decided to write it? Because I know that's a big endeavor to take on.
Um, as you possibly can see on the screen, that one of my eyes is a bit weird and skewiffy. And I started to write the book really out of my own relationship to seeing and not seeing, and being treated differently when I had a white cane. And the moment I got on the uniform of blindness, so my white cane, my sunglasses, I even tried a dog for a bit. I felt that I was treated very differently by society, and I found that weird because I was just the same person. It took me a long time because the book covers classical antiquity to the present. And I wanted it to be not academic, but I wanted it to be an entertaining read, as I was saying, broccoli and cheese. And I wanted to explain these two, that it's a very polarized relationship we have in society, Western society at least, between how we relate to blind people and disabled people in general. And the two extremes are either one end, you've got they're a burden, they're, living off the state, or pity, like, oh, poor thing.
Mhm.
Or the other end is, oh my God, they climbed Everest, they're amazing. And I remember meeting this blind man who climbed Everest. I said, why? Why would you do that? I said, I'm just trying to get out of bed in the morning and go to work. You set the standards so high. And he said, no, but it's just, and he said something interesting. He said, but I wanted to do it for myself. And I said, that's fine. And he said it was the media that made him into the hero. So he and was actually kind of pretty sane and very normal. He's if anyone wants to look him up, he's called Eric Wiedemeyer, and there's a lovely picture of him top of Everest. You're like, oh God, why? Why would you do that? But I kind of got fed up with the two extremes, because actually the majority of us, and there's a lot of people with declining sight, sort of sight, no sight. Um, there's a spectrum of sight and or lack of, and we're all going to feel it. I mean, 1 in 5 of us are going to be disabled in our lifetime, and I think it's in America, it's something like 1 in 10 have eyesight problems, and that's before you're 60. That's not even before getting older.
Oh, wow.
So it seemed to me that it was something that affected everybody, myself included, and I wanted to kind of find out why. Why do people treat each other like this? And was it me? Did I have a big sign on my head? Or or was there something in history that we have been taught over time? It's like I call it a palimpsest. It's like, there's a layer and another layer and another layer and another layer. And it's my view, it's totally my view. I could be completely wrong, but it was a really fun thing to do. So that's why I wrote it, was to kind of basically explain to myself why people treated blind people weirdly differently. And in a survey, a John Hopkins survey, and they all know, what would you rather not have? What was the most frightening thing to you?
Mhm.
And blindness is top.
Really?
And I know, I'm like, God, I think cancer is pretty scary. you know.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and AIDS, if you're can you imagine having a blood transfusion and not thinking about it and then coming back and finding that? I would find that terrifying. But
Right.
apparently, blindness is the most scary thing that most people find in history, in surveys. So who knows what a survey really means? But
Wow, interesting. Yeah, well, I'm with you. I wouldn't climb Mount Everest blind. Um,
don't do it.
but
Too
yeah,
chilly. It's too chilly.
we are looking at, of course, is the history of, what Jesus Christ was teaching us. And how maybe what we need to be doing is paying more attention to the needs of others rather than to just seeing the disabilities of others.
The thing I really think is amazing about Jesus Christ is that he talked about blindness, deafness, lameness, people with leprosy, people with weird stuff going on. And some of the most ancient images we have of Christ is of him touching people's eyes. In Rome, I used to live in Rome as a journalist, and one of the things I thought was extraordinary was they found in the catacombs beautiful, beautiful old carvings and paintings on very early Christian graves.
Mhm.
And they are Christ touching people's eyes. And it's all from, I think it's St. Matthew, where and he touched their eyes,
Mhm.
and they were cured.
Yes.
So whether you are a good Christian or not, it is absolutely true that he engaged with the people who were considered at the time the most outliers of society. So
Mhm.
anyone with illness, I mean, it's a weakness, and in that world. So my first thought was, what a cool dude, Mister Jesus Christ is, because he brought it up and he made it mainstream. And he's like, look, we're all equal in God's eyes. The second thing I think I found difficult was there is a reference to the word the blind,
Mhm.
and the phrase is, no, he cured the blind, the sick, the deaf, and the lame.
Right.
And I think that the modern day is very difficult. Our vocabulary has changed. But I think what Christianity set up was this notion, it's called caritas, to care for, to take care of others. And there's this huge, amazing tradition of hospices and hospitals and shelters for people who were outcast from society. And that often was the blind, the lame, the deaf, and whatever it is.
Right.
And that in itself sets up a model of behavior, which
Mhm.
is called in academic circles as the charitable model, which is poor blind people, they can't do anything for themselves.
Mhm.
So we as Christians must help them.
Mhm.
So it set up a slight inequality, which kind of continued way throughout history, even to the last, it's only started changing in the last 20 years. And I think what I found shocking was how much of that comes from the Bible, this notion of you must take care. I think people took a notion that was take care of people who need it, which is completely wonderful. And
Mhm.
actually the first time it really was happening in the West, but it kind of went a little bit too far. And it was sort of like, let's put them into a little box over there and
Right.
pat them on the head and go, poor people.
Mhm.
And that goes through way through to the 19th century. I mean, it happens, it gets much worse during the Industrial Revolution.
Mhm.
And there's the word disability, for example. A lot of people think, we can't prove it, that it comes from the word from ability versus not being able. So the Industrial Revolution happens, we've got factories, we've got the means of operation, the means of production, the creation of capital. But if you're disabled, you can't work in a factory. You probably kill yourself. So
Mhm.
you're disabled from society, and
Wow.
you go to the workhouse and you go to the poorhouse.
Mhm.
So it's not surprising that we do have the charitable notion of blindness,
Mhm.
because or any disability, to be fair. The charitable model is you are so disabled from society that we as Christians must help you.
Mhm.
And I think that has changed. And you can be a very good Christian and still believe in helping people, absolutely.
Mhm.
But I think the question now is you should probably ask. Just say, like, so there's a big hashtag. If anyone's ever bored, they can go on Twitter,
Mhm.
or sorry, X. And there's a hashtag called just ask, don't grab.
Hmm.
And it was set up by a charity actually who defends the rights of blind people because you there's a joke in the blind world which is why did the chicken cross the road? And it's like because no one asked him and they dragged him. And it's sort of this idea that you don't get you get to choose. You have your own
I know it's
volition.
changed a little bit too, and at least over here in the public school system, where they've integrated
Yes,
people into
exactly.
classrooms a little bit more rather than keeping them in separate areas all day. So,
It's not, it's so the phrase that is well known and it was part of the ADA and it was very high in the 90s, it's still around. It goes nothing about us without us.
mm,
So if you have a disability of any kind, blindness included,
mhm.
you want to be asked. So the new thinking, which has sort of been going on in America a lot, it's called the social model.
Okay.
And one of the things that I think this can work very well with Christianity is because it's kind of what I was saying, why I think Jesus is such a dude, because it's about equality. And that if society puts the ramp up, if society has Braille on the lift, if society makes an aeroplane fit for a wheelchair, it's only society that disables you. So and that's equality. That's about saying you have just as much the right to get on the plane as I do. You have an access to a toilet,
Mhm.
we all do. And I think that is a very Christian thought, actually, this notion of equality and that God looks at us and we're all the same.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what kind of physical or mental illnesses you have. You are all human in God's eye. We are all his children.
Well, you kind of hinted at it earlier, but you kind of talked about how our words really matter and how we say things
Yes.
and how we talk about people is important. Why should we always put the person first, as in saying someone is a person who is blind instead of calling them a blind person? How does this small change make such a big difference?
It's a lovely question. It basically is because if you start defining someone by their physical disability, so blindness, deafness, then you're saying that's all they are,
Hmm.
the blind, the deaf. I think that um, the change is, again, it's back to the individual. So I have my own agency and I can do things just because I'm blind doesn't, or I'm losing my sight doesn't mean that I can't climb Mount Everest. Everyone has an example of their own experience and it's always different.
Hmm.
And so I always I always ask people. I mean, I often go and hang out with my blind friends and I never presume they can't cross the road. I just go, "Oh, do you need any help?" Or would you like, can I assist you or whatever it is. And
Hmm.
I find and most people go, no, no, I'm fine. And then, some people who have not been engaging with blind people very much get a bit anxious. Their anxiety is more than the person with the disability. The thing that I think people have to bear in mind is the consent. It's an engagement between two people.
Hmm.
And if someone doesn't want to cross the road, or if the
Right.
chicken doesn't want to cross the road,
Uh-huh.
then it doesn't have to. It can stay there or it can cross on its own.
Right.
But it's just
That's a
consent.
very good way to think about it. I like that. And thank you for that, because that is helpful for people to know what and how, I mean, really we should be reacting that way to anybody.
Well, that's the point. That's the
Yeah.
point. It's like you wouldn't go up to any random person and drag them across the road. You'd
Right.
say, "Would you like some help?" Or "Do you
Right.
want to know?" I mean, the other day somebody held an umbrella above me and said, Would you like some cover?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh, thank you." But
Yes.
it does backfire. And I will tell you a story that will make your congregation smile to themselves. So, a dear friend of mine, he's a wheelchair user, and he became a wheelchair user in the middle of his life and he's wheeling and every morning he does exercises and he takes his wheelchair and he wheels up the chair up 3 stairs and then he wheels back and he's using his upper body strength to do this. So he's doing this in the park and this very well-meaning man comes along and says, "Oh my god, you need some help," and starts pushing him up the staircase.
Okay.
And my friend goes ballistic. He's like, "This is the fourth time this week, just get your hands off me, how dare you." And the man turns around and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to invade your space or anything like that." So he goes away. And the next morning, my friend's going up and down his stairs, and he's doing the thing again, going, wheeling himself up 3 stairs. And this other man, this car goes past,
Uh-huh.
stops and watches my friend going wheel up, wheel down. And this time my friend is like, that's it, I've lost it. You know, what is the world coming to? And he turns around, he says, very loud swearing,
Uh-huh.
go away. And the guy goes, oh, I'm from the Paralympic team, Olympic team committee, and I've been told that you're really strong and I wanted to see you in action.
Oh my goodness.
And we were thinking of, asking you and offering you a place, but no, don't worry. So you never know why someone wants to help you. But I always thought that was really funny.
Kind of moves us on to the next question, which talks about stereotypes. So,
Mm.
are there things or stereotypes that people automatically think or assume about a person who is blind? You've kind of talked about it a little bit with, well, they need help up the stairs, or, they just assume they need the help without
There
asking.
are, and the big one, I call it the Scooby-Doo one, which is so you're meant to walk around like this, going whoa, like that. That's meant to be. And I once did a broadcast for a TV station, and I remember I walked quite swiftly up to the door of a cafe, and I was meant to go in and interview the cafe director, and the director said, "Can you look more blind, please?"
Oh,
And I was like,
oh
"Excuse
my
me,
goodness.
what was that? What would that look like?" And he
Uh-huh.
said, "Oh, well, can you just sort of stretch your hand out and feel for the door like that?" So I was like, "Yeah, but I don't need to. I've got a cane."
Right.
And even if I did feel the door, I probably wouldn't do it like a zombie from Scooby-Doo. I would probably just push my arm against it. And
Yeah.
I thought I was really shocked at how people presume that. I think the main ones people that you have, there's a presumption that you're compensated. So a lot of people go, oh, you must have a really good memory, you have really good hearing. And Harvard did some studies of twins, of people with blindness, and the twins, one was blind, one was not. And
Mhm.
what they found out was really interesting, was that they had exactly the same hearing and exactly the same memory and tastes,
Okay.
but the blind person uses it differently.
Oh.
So it comes from exactly the cortex in your brain, exactly the same place.
Uh-huh.
But you basically, it's not a compensation, and you won't be any more brilliant simply because you can't see.
Mhm.
But that comes from classical literature, because the earliest images we have is Tiresias from Oedipus Rex, and also from Homeric, from Homer.
Mhm.
And it's the person who was blind usually was the had an inner vision, so they could see something that you couldn't see.
Okay.
And so that's where that trope comes from. And then Christianity comes along and actually changes the trope, which is you're equal and you must look after somebody else.
Okay.
And then you get sort of revolution and socialism, and that changes it again. So the stereotypes have changed over time.
Mhm.
And it actually goes back to what we started talking about just now, earlier, the first question about, climbing Everest. So you're either a burden, or you're inspirational and an extraordinary person.
Right.
But most blind people are pretty ordinary. I mean, we all are
Yeah.
basically. We're all the same in God's eyes. So
Correct.
there's not some sort of like miracle that happens to you when you can't see.
Right.
And in fact, for a lot of people, it's very scary, and understandably so.
Well, I will move on to the next question, which is how can we pray for or help a person who is blind? You've kind of talked about physically what we can do a little bit, but is there a is there anything that comes to mind when you think about that?
I think I'd ask a question back, if I may, which is,
Okay.
why would you need to pray from a blind person any more than anyone else?
Sure. That's a very good question. I agree.
So
You're right.
there's not a pity. You don't do a pity blind. You don't do a pity pray.
Sure.
If I'm having a bad day, yes, thank you. My mum's really sick. I would really appreciate a prayer. Thank you.
Sure.
But just because I'm losing my sight, unless, because what it implies
Mhm.
is that my life is much, much harder than yours,
Oh,
and that I need more help than you. And actually, it could be that very day you need more help, or your auntie needs more help. So
sure.
I think I would be cautious
Sure.
on that one. I think what I probably would say, but also I think Cassia must have told you that I lived in Rome and I was constantly smothered by nuns. So, and they would all come up to me and grab my cheeks and go, "Poverina!" "Ah."
Oh
It was a bit overwhelming. But I think I would never be insulted by someone praying for me because I would consider it quite it's an impulse, an act of kindness on your part.
Sure.
Um, I guess I think the thing I would say to help so is make society more equal. So um, I would be praying for a different, like, may society put in that wheel round. May so, like, can we make this a fairer place to be as a disabled person? Because that might actually help more people.
Sure.
And to give wisdom to the people, the leaders in the community who make these decisions, or that's who I would possibly be praying for, because I thought I'd want them to have the spiritual guidance to think, you know what, there's another way of doing this. We do not have to put people as a burden. We don't have to put them as um, a hero.
But, and you kind of touched on it before of how we can make things more fair or more of an even playing field. I think this kind of helps with that. But how can we make something or some place more accessible so someone doesn't need to ask for help? So,
Nice thought, really good thought, because that would make us all much more equal. Like,
right.
um, I think that's planning. I mean, so the way I often go and consult for big corporates, and I go in and they go, "What can we do? What can we do?" And I say, "Well, the first thing you can do is incorporate this type of thinking from the start. So whenever you do a new project,
Hmm.
or whenever you go on a school trip, or whenever whatever kind of project that involves other people, and you have to know that 1 in 5 will be disabled in some way, and you might not even know it because it'll be invisible,
Hmm.
is to imagine some basic things like, can you get on the bus?
Hmm.
Can you access the website? Can you and the easiest way to do that is to ask the people themselves. So you go, what can I do to make this more accessible?
Okay.
And that's it. That is it. And if people don't know, you can ask, you can give examples. You could say, oh, well, if you need a wheelchair, and some people you'll find get offended, I don't need a wheelchair, and it turns out they do.
Mm.
But you could just offer people options. Do you need this? Would you like that? We have an accessible room on the ground floor. You can invert the colors on our website. You can make it larger at one tick of the button. You can dictate your words. I mean, I dictated a lot of my book,
Hmm.
and that really helped. And when I got my book contract, I had an amazing agent who put in my book contract that I needed an assistant
Okay.
to help me edit because I can't do it. It's too much for me. And so I think there's the things that we can do are small incremental things every day, every week, every month. It's not one big thing and da-da, it's done.
Yes.
It's just shifting. I call it tectonic plates. I don't know if you can see my hands, but
Yes.
I don't know, like they just need to shift a tiny bit
Okay.
and then a tiny bit, because by the time you've done that for 10 years and then another 10 years, it will have shifted a lot, as long as you're willing to learn and to change if you need to.
Hmm.
And I sort of like this idea of forgiving yourself for getting it wrong, because you will get it wrong. We all get it wrong. I get it wrong.
Sure.
And I write about it and I talk about it all day. So, I think my best advice is that, and I think your question was, what can we do? I think try and get it right. And if you get it wrong, don't worry about it. At least you're aware of it. And if you can bring up your kids not to feel frightened and worried about disability, and, if you can ask a human being, another human being, do you need help, whether they're disabled or not, I think is a completely kind and thoughtful Christian thing to do.
Hmm.
But I also think you can't pity people, because I think it perpetuates the myth that people are below you. They're you're the one in control and you're the one who's got the good life and they've got a bad life.
Sure.
And it's not a competition.
Hmm.
It's a I think that's what I absolutely believe Christianity really teaches us, is that we're all equal.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I've got that right. I don't know unless somebody said something different, but I think I got that right.
But thank you so much, and thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your knowledge and your being willing to share your experience because it's very
Well,
helpful.
I would love to. If there's anything I can do to help anytime, let me know. And I'd love to know what feedback you get. Like, do people agree, or did they think I'm far too secular?
Well, no, I don't. I
Let
think
me know.
we're a very open-minded congregation, so I think it'll be good to.
Well,
Uh,
I'd love to visit you when I'm next time, when I'm in
yes,
Iowa. I will come and
I,
say hello.
yes, I hope that happens. And actually, I hope to get out there to London sometime. I've never been,
Of
so.
course. Oh my God, I'll take you to Westminster Abbey to Evensong.
Oh yeah, that does sound lovely. Yeah, that sounds.
We'd be honored. We'd be delighted and honored. And if you don't, the blind leading the blind.
So you can say I'm a believer, 'cause I'm living my life.